and welcome to the Amplifying Scientific Innovation video podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Sophia Onoye, founder and CEO of the Sophia Consulting Firm, a life science marketing and communications consultancy that was established in New York City with the goal of amplifying scientific innovation. The goal of this podcast is to showcase scientific innovations stemming from global life science companies through conversations with senior leaders who share their unique leadership journey, corporate vision, and industry outlook. My guest today is Mr. Brian Loew, founder and CEO of Inspire, an organization that he created in 2005 with the goal of accelerating life-changing discoveries through engaged patients and caregivers in safe, trusted online social networks. The Inspire Network currently includes over 100 patient advocacy partners, inclusive of top 20 pharmaceutical and biotech companies, as well as the NIH, FDA, Mayo Clinic, and academic researchers at Stanford, Yale, Brown, and other universities. Excitingly, there are approximately 2.2 million members, 3 million reported medical conditions, and 11 million patient and caregiver-generated posts. Brian is a frequent speaker and writer on the topics of health-focused social networks and digital health. He sits on the boards of the Robert Parker Center for ALS Research at Johns Hopkins and New Jersey Goals of Care. He was a Red Jacket recipient from Farmer Voice magazine for his long-time contributions to the industry. And he recently received the Invisible Disabilities Association's Corporate Award. I was connected to Brian through John Novak, Head of Patient Engagement and Senior Director of Communications at Inspire, based on our mutual interest in patient advocacy. I'm looking forward to an enlightening discussion today with Brian. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to see you again, and I'm happy to be here.
It's my absolute pleasure. Just so you know, I just keep replaying the YouTube video of the panel that we did for JPM. You did an excellent job. And that was what sort of really fascinated me to learn more about you. So we'll start today with my favorite question. What is your definition of scientific innovation?
You know, I hadn't thought about that until you told me. And I guess for me, innovation is, creating something where there was kind of a void before. There are a lot of unanswered problems. I trip a little bit on the word scientific because I think a lot of innovation comes from things which we don't necessarily recognize as science when they're new. But there's so much potential now to connect people and information in ways that weren't available before and to innovate. A lot of times in the past, experts have been isolated and separated from one another. It seems like things are accelerating, specifically because people are able to connect in ways that they never would have 100 or even 20 years ago.
I love the part about filling a void. And to me, I think what's interesting about scientific innovation or any innovation is having the instinct to even recognize that there's a void to begin with. So thank you for that. It's very philosophical. I'm going to think about that for some time now.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So you've achieved a lot as a CEO of Inspire, including the recent launch of the Inspire Research Accelerator. I'll be curious to know what you would consider as your most impactful professional accomplishment prior to your current role as a CEO of Inspire.
I've always been an inventor or a starter of things. I've always been entrepreneurial. I actually feel that my impact with Inspire has been far greater than things that came before. My focus, before this was often technology, but it's really Inspire where I feel that we have the ability to advance human health and to make an impact in people's lives in a really crucial way that to me feels more important than other things. I suppose previously I developed a lot of familiarity with technology and understanding how to build businesses and manage and grow companies, but it's really Inspire that feels like the biggest accomplishment.
Well, that's pretty obvious. I was really blown away by just how vast the Inspire network is. And now I'm curious to find out what inspired you to establish Inspire and how does it tie into your leadership mantra?
Yeah, I think, there are different kinds of entrepreneurs. for me, it was really about, there was the goal of accelerating medical progress through communities of involved patients. I felt strongly about that. But, I kind of looked around and I couldn't find many others creating large communities of patients on a safe platform. And so I decided to create it. So back to filling the void, the idea was this needs to exist. It doesn't exist. Let's build it. So, for me, leadership was a means to an end, not the goal all by itself. It was really a way of figuring out, how do we pull together people and resources to make, to create this and cause it to exist.
So is that your leadership mantra then?
I never thought about it until you asked. I guess, yeah, for me, leadership is sort of pulling people together, recognizing their strengths, understanding how everyone can contribute in the best ways possible. And I'm happy to just be the glue that kind of, sticks those things together.
I think you've assembled a wonderful team, if I could say so myself, especially from an external perspective, and the work that you do, and being able to be connected to patient advocates like Ms. Kimberly Richardson, who was participated in the panel. That is something that is truly remarkable. And it leads me to my next question, which is, Inspire's goal is to accelerate clinical trial recruitment through the use of safe, trusted online social networks that are organized by medical condition for patients and their caregivers. Very clear goal. Now, if we focus on this goal, what are some major opportunities for Inspire, especially with the rise in telehealth and digital health technologies?
Yeah, and by the way, what Kim Richardson is remarkable. And one of the things that's become clear is that there are people like her who are part of Inspire who bring extraordinary value. And I think historically we didn't know about these people. Their voices are amplified. And, I think that, sort of getting to your question, the opportunities for remote or digital health technology or telehealth are stronger than ever. And it feels like COVID has been terrible. But one perhaps small silver lining from it is that it has accelerated remote medicine, remote clinical trial participation, and the idea that, you and I are talking together now on Zoom. There might have been a time a year ago where we felt like, well, we should really wait until we're in the same room together to do it. That somehow, that would be a barrier. And similarly, there's a lot of medicine that needs to happen, face to face in the same room, but there's a lot that doesn't. And I think if you just look at access to care, it's been dramatically improved by changes in attitudes that are the result of COVID, right? You're able to see your doctor, and I've talked with some doctors who prefer it as well. They can see patients for what they know is something where they can do a lot over the phone or on Zoom, and it's now okay for them to do that. Whereas before it would have felt somehow unprofessional, but now it's all right. And so I think it's a wonderful time, and we've probably accelerated this by 10 years or more, because now it's acceptable to do this remotely.
That's remarkable. And do you think that patients are more open or more understanding about decentralized clinical trials, for example, now that everything is becoming more remote?
Oh, I think patients always have been. In fact, remote trials or decentralized trials have been something that, in our experience, patients have always wanted to participate in. And it's actually been a regulatory or a conservative kind of attitude by a lot of people involved in the clinical trial process that's delayed it. There have been people beating this drum, people like Craig Lipset and, others who've been beating this drum for a very long time. Yes. I think it's finally happening now, but patients were never the barrier. In fact, I think patients are probably pretty happy about this.
I'm sure you'll be pleased to know that I actually interviewed Craig Lipset.
Oh, good.
Yes, he's doing some great stuff.
Terrific.
Yeah. And so switching gears a little bit, we've discussed this previously in the past. A recent World Cancer Research Network study demonstrated that less than 1 in 4 patients in pharmaceutical company-sponsored clinical trials are African-American cancer patients. Can you provide more details on what your team is doing specifically to address disparities in clinical trial recruitment for minorities?
Yeah, it's something we talk about a lot. We focus on creating large, diverse communities of patients and inviting those patients to participate in research. I think the key idea is that our goal is to be safe and meaningful and helpful to everyone. for example, our health journeys incorporate ethnicity so that patients can understand their own journey and connect with one another and compare themselves in ways they wish. But, trust is earned, and, fostering trust takes time. Our approach to this is to recruit in advance, create a great space for patients to join a community and be involved for all the reasons they might want for their own benefit. And then later invite them to participate in a clinical trial. I think that's the right way to do it, rather than what sometimes feels like a kind of mercenary clinical trial recruitment process. It feels transactional to the patients, where, I've heard sometimes people say we have to, someone should target specific populations. And I think that's off base. Instead, be a space that's open and involving to everyone. And then if you do it right, the representation in the community should be the same as it is in the general population.
Yeah, that's what we would hope for. And I think as your platform continues to grow, my hope is that through just the process of multiplication, that more and more patients, more and more diverse patients will become part of your network. And hopefully that will sort of mirror what's going on in the macro environment in terms of the need for more diverse patient data.
Right. I agree. And there's a lot that can happen in the health ecosystem around trust. We know that there are trust issues among communities of color, and sometimes for good reason. And there's a lot that we can do, as a country to improve that.
Yeah. I know the Tuskegee experiment, the Henrietta Lacks debacle, and other such cases remain top of mind. But, hopefully the future is about bringing new ways of thinking, right? And hopefully by engaging more patients, the trust issue would no longer be so potent, because right now I think it still is.
Yeah. And I think it's even things beyond outright deception, like Tuskegee, which is maybe the worst that I know of. It's other things like if you look at transparency around pricing, for example. So just to pick one example, we know that insulin pricing is sky high. You're now talking about, for many patients, $1,000 a month, right? This is for a drug that even the most modern insulins cost almost nothing to make, and this is sort of well documented. And prices are dramatically lower in other countries. We know that there are data to show that people of color are more likely to be diabetic, and they're also more likely to be underinsured. And these are just data, national data. So it's kind of a double whammy: underinsured, more likely to be diabetic, super high insulin prices, and people are reasonably unhappy about this. And so, I think the reason I mentioned that along with trust is that, it's hard to trust a company that is dramatically overcharging you with a life or death drug, right?
Yeah.
And I think people resent being treated badly and then potentially being recruited by the same company.
I know. Yeah. I've written about this before, about the reputation problem in the pharmaceutical industry. Some people would disagree and say that, there's no problems. I tend to think that there's a need for increased transparency. So thank you for highlighting that. Yeah. Of course, the things need to change. We understand that drug prices are high because of the R&D cost, but also there's a lot of inefficiencies in the system that could be improved through emerging technologies like AI, for example. So it's really important to emphasize the transparency bit. So I appreciate that perspective from you.
Yeah, no, that's right. And by the way, we've surveyed the members of Inspire. There's a ton of appreciation among members for what industry is doing to develop innovative products. And I think people appreciate the innovation and want to be well and appreciate the drugs greatly. And they're willing to pay for innovation. It's the paying for things that are not innovative that I think upsets people.
Yeah. I agree with you completely. And switching gears a little bit, given what we know now about the global impact of infectious diseases such as COVID-19, Ebola, etc., are there any plans for Inspire to expand its network beyond chronic diseases such as cancers?
Sure. Today we have 3,300 different diseases represented in Inspire. 28% of our members have one or more rare disorders. 35%, as you said, are in cancer, and then very large populations of symptomatic chronic conditions. The diversity of those rare disorders is extraordinary. And, in many of the cancers and rare diseases, and obviously there's a lot of overlap now because you have rare cancers. Inspire is sort of has around 20, 30, or 40% of the population with those rare diseases. And I think that's because of the kind of the feedback loop in a healthy social network, where you have this nice growth loop where the more members join, the more people discover it, and then, build strong groups. So I'm particularly excited about the kind of long tail of rare disease, where we're building these large populations whose members seem very interested in, participating in research and accelerating development.
Yeah, but not infectious disease. It's that.
We do have infectious disease populations, but now that you mention it, I think we could do more.
Yeah. Right. And thank you for sharing that. I was born in Nigeria, as I probably shared with you before. And I know every 2 minutes in Africa, a child dies from malaria. So even though malaria obviously is not such a big deal here, but what we've learned from COVID is that we live in a global world, and to make sure that as many types of patients that are included in these networks will be beneficial to all. So
that's absolutely right. And we're also, Inspire is increasingly international. We have members in every country in the world now, but we still have a long way to go. Today, still about 70% of our members are in the United States, and we're becoming increasingly international, but that could happen faster too.
Absolutely. Well, I'm super excited about the future of Inspire. So let's look outside Inspire for a little bit. In your opinion, of course, how sustainable are the changes that are being implemented to mitigate the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on clinical trials and drug access? Do you think that these changes are going to be sustainable?
Very much so. I think there's no turning back. I think people, just as you talked about remote medicine as well, I think it feels like COVID boosted the whole industry, by a dozen years. Smart people aren't going to want to go back to the old ways. I think everyone has realized that if there are things that you can do remotely, why add hours and hours to the trip and delay and scheduling and coordinating when you can do them remotely? It's not a substitute for everything, of course, but it really feels like we've sort of been given permission to do things in a more agile way, and no one's going to want to give that up, which is a good thing in my opinion.
No, I completely agree with you. I just hope that people are not so quick to go back to the old normal, that they forget all the great things we've learned from the new normal,
I completely agree. Agree.
So now this is my own personal curiosity. Are there any technologies that you are currently excited about, especially as it relates to cancer clinical trial recruitment, monitoring, and data analysis, and why?
These are things that are probably not surprising, but a lot of testing and diagnostics that people can do from home are more advanced than they used to be. We have the ability to do good genetic sequencing now with you can do exome sequencing in a pretty straightforward fashion with saliva remotely. You have great and secure phone apps where you can do, you can share data and monitor it very well. You have, there's some movements of kind of ethical hackers who are biohackers who are, part of the quantified self movement, are taking measurements from their own bodies and sharing these in sort of online spaces safely. And I think those contribute dramatically to the availability of information. So I'm very excited about that. I think, the ability of patients themselves to contribute data which are meaningful is one of the biggest differences. And it gives me, it heartens me to see that scientists and people developing medical products and research are more and more embracing data that flow from patients themselves through these, secure channels.
Yeah, I'm also quite excited about the data-enabled patient. I think that the future is really exciting, and Inspire sits at probably the most interesting intersection, because you're really empowering these patients by giving them a community, and the exchange of information is really valuable. So Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, of course.
So my second to last question for you is, thinking broadly, what do you think are some key consideration factors that will help to sustain innovation in the life science industry?
I hope a continuation of what we've been doing in the past 5 or 10 years, which is treating patients as, sort of intelligent, valuable participants in the scientific discovery process. When we were children, at least my experience was that the doctor was the center of the universe, and that the patient didn't have much to contribute, and wasn't particularly welcome. And today, many patients, people like Kim Richards, saying, I have a lot to contribute here. I'm open to share my data and my experience. And smart researchers are listening to that and are realizing that this is a way to move faster, that there's an extraordinary amount of data and willingness to participate. You only have to ask. So that is perhaps what I'm most interested and excited in.
No, that's really exciting. I think that, the future is going to be patient-centric, and we're going to keep moving away from that paternalistic type of healthy administration. Yeah. So the final question is simple. Do you have any closing thoughts or commentary that you'd like to share before we wrap?
Well, just to thank you and to say that platforms like yours are really the way forward, that if you can spread the word about the subjects you're focused on, I think we'll make a lot more progress a lot more quickly. And so I thank you as well.
It's my absolute pleasure. I'm incredibly passionate about amplifying scientific innovation, but I can only do that through the gracious support of people like yourself. So thank you for an engaging conversation. I think that this is not going to be the last time we'll have a conversation, for sure. So I look forward to staying in touch with you.
Likewise, so do I.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.